one of the things I think that happens typically before Lent and during Lent, especially at the first part of Lent, is this idea that there's just a heightened sense of a little bit of agitation. You know, people just feel like they're, I don't know, just this a strange feeling that they're just ready to really go into an interaction with others, Adam, and it's not appropriate. Meaning, there's a real reactive mode. There's a ready to pick a fight, and it's not good. And you can see that happening. Now, a couple things I wanted to ask you, Adam, because I know you're going to unpack this for us, but also, is there a demon component to this? Because I've oftentimes when I go out, and especially if I'm going to an event or even a social gathering, and I see this like underlying agitation, I'm thinking to myself, man, the demons are they're going, crazy tonight. What do you say to all that?
Well, the idea of picking your battles it's obviously important just to start off on a practical level, right? We all have limited time and energy in life. We have to decide what we're going to give that time and energy to. And Lent is a penitential time where we are supposed to the battle that we pick is ourselves very much during Lent. And here's the thing, Deb, I don't know about you, but that makes everybody uncomfortable, to try to scrutinize yourself in terms of what you could be doing better. Could I be praying more? Can I be doing, acts of charity? Could I be repenting? Looking at ourselves instead of our rationalizations of, well, I go to Mass on Sunday and, I'm basically a good person, and so God and I are good and I don't need to do any more. That's kind of like, without saying it, that's kind of where a lot of us go. We kind of fall into our routine and we just go week to week, month to month. Well, Lent is a time of challenge, very much so. But it's uncomfortable to look at ourselves and say, well, what could I be doing better? What sins really am I not trying to root out or do better with this year, this season of my life? And so it's going to make us irritable a little bit. We may not, it may not be fully a conscious thing, but you might see that leaking out. And I think that's sometimes where a little bit of that, not healthy confrontation can come from, because it's uncomfortable to look at ourselves. And this is the time that we're really called to do that. So when we're in Lent, when we are picking our battles with ourselves, I think that's kind of the first thing to remember. It's with ourselves primarily. If we can get our own house straightened out as much as possible, that is going to do more to impact other people by far than us getting on a high horse and telling somebody, oh, you need to do better with this, or, I think you really fell short over here. Whatever that kind of negative confrontation is, or I don't like your politics, or, I think your attitude should be better. Whatever it might be, that isn't going to generate usually a whole lot of positive interaction, and it's not going to get you what you're hoping for in terms of a good impact. But if you just live a good life and pursue holiness and show that you're trying to do the work to improve, to be more patient, to be more loving, to be more understanding, and do the things that we do in Lent, that's going to be more attractive and actually have more impact in most cases than criticism. We think of saints, obviously, like you think of Mother Teresa, right? Easy example that basically everybody knows her name, whether you're Catholic or not. And the idea is she lives such a life of charity and virtue. She didn't preach at us and say, you need to be like me, or you need to stop living a sinful life. She just did what she did. But the very example itself challenges us to do better. And so in a little way, we can do the same thing in our lives. If we work hard to root out the sins and bad behaviors and bad interactions, that itself, I think, is an encouragement for other people.
Interesting that you're speaking about this, Adam, because as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, this takes a lot of effort. It really does, to be a really good Christian, to improve and to really try to strive for holiness. It takes a lot. And so oftentimes, don't you think that in this world, when I started at the beginning of this, the next right thing, talking about, reactive mode and things like that, that's how people are, emotionally driven, kind of going with it without a plan, without even thinking of what the result is going to be. And then they pick up the pieces after they've made all the mess. What do you say to all that? Because this is a serious work to be a Christian.
Yeah, it is. It is. And this is one of the seasons, being a penitential season, that it gets very real. Picking up the pieces after an unhealthy confrontation, the damage is already done. Like, you could do a little bit of damage control and maybe try to put a Band-Aid on things and maybe apologize a little bit later or something like that. But really, you've already done most of the damage to the relationship, or at least to it for that day, that week, whatever it might be, however intense it was, or maybe it was just online. But I think part of what the Christian walk is about is trying to be patient even when it's hard for us. Maybe our resources are thin. We're down, to not a whole lot of energy left. And somebody might be challenging online, or maybe they said something very critical about something that, you take very personally, or, you see as part of your identity. And there can be that temptation to kind of fire back. But, it's the same with sin, I think. It's in the moments when we're tempted to do that, when our nerves are frayed a little bit, where the resources are running low. It's in those times, and when we're tempted and we don't feel like we have the strength, and we're really struggling and we just want to just give up on this and stop thinking about it and just do whatever. It's actually in those times, Deb, that I think you get the most growth, because it's when you're truly challenged versus when it's easy. Like we hear that in Scripture, like, loving the person that loves you, what credit is that to you? Love the person that hates you and persecutes you, and pray for them, right?
Right.
That's what God is looking for. God isn't looking for the easy thing, that when everything's comfortable and going well, and you say, like, well, aren't I a wonderful, loving Christian? I'm doing great. It's actually when that person is saying, something very hurtful that you're tempted to just react to. It's actually in those times that I think we really can grow.
Well, we're definitely given a lot of opportunities for growth in this world, because there's a lot a lot of resistance, a lot coming at us. People are cranky. I've noticed that there are a lot that just they have a short fuse. They're ready to pick a fight. They're ready to argue, criticize, all the negative emotions. Which we know, like you said, it doesn't help. It's just a mess. I mean, yes, you can apologize, but how much is that apology worth, right? And so there's a lot to be said about this. And I think that it's important that we're addressing it on Catholic radio, so we can help, our brothers and sisters in Christ, to walk the walk, talk the talk, and really be the best, image of Christ you can be out there into the world, right? Because that's what we're called to do, is to be Christ in the world. And, that means that we really have to live it. What really always gets me sometimes, that it doesn't sit well with me, is when I see somebody arguing with somebody else out in public, and one of them is wearing a crucifix. it just bothers me. I don't know. I'd like for you to comment on that. I mean, if we're going to wear these beautiful, and oftentimes these necklaces we wear are sacramentals, right? Because they've been blessed. If we're going to wear these sacramentals around our necks or as a bracelet or even a ring or something of that nature, I mean, shouldn't we be elevated to a point of trying to be better out there, not just the average, person walking around? I mean, it's kind of an interesting topic because I just think this is important that we kind of just, peel back all the layers of this, look at it from many different angles, and just see if we can come out with a better understanding of how to conduct ourselves. I mean, because I'll be honest with you, I mean, people can really push your buttons, especially during the Lenten season. I will tell you that because I actually think when people really try to do some extreme fasts during Lent, they're pretty cranky.
Well, when you mentioned that before the break about the person, wearing a crucifix yet maybe getting in a really kind of nasty argument, it makes me think of people that wear uniforms. When we think of soldiers, they're wearing a uniform, or a police officer, or even a fireman, something like that. When they're wearing a uniform, their behavior while they're wearing that uniform impacts the impression that people have of the entire organization, right?
Yep.
You have a certain responsibility to behave in a way that's in line with that organization's morals and conduct, basically guides or rules for behavior. And, we all know the basics, be polite, be civil, be appropriate, all of those things. But the same is true when you're wearing a crucifix or wearing things there where you're putting that out there and, letting it be visible that you're Christian, you're trying to walk a Christian walk. And no, not every, we're not saying everybody's perfect and, you have to be perfect or you can't wear a crucifix. But sometimes, yeah, I agree. I've seen some things where you kind of cringe a little bit. So you want to remember, you're representing Jesus in a sense. You're representing his church. You're representing
Absolutely.
his faithful. At the least, you're representing his faithful. And I think to a lot of people, they'll just be like, well, that's a Catholic, and it's kind of vague for them, but you're certainly representing the Catholic Church, the Catholic world. And so that's a real responsibility. And, it's kind of similar to taking the Lord's name in vain, which
Right.
we have talked about in the past. When you do that, it's a really bad example and message to the people that hear you doing that. And certainly we know it's a mortal sin, actually, so it's a huge deal from God's perspective. But socially, it's important. So, picking your battles in terms of maybe let your confrontations be more with yourself than with other people.
Oh, I like
Lent.
that. Yeah, say that again. That is really good. Okay, explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, just the idea that if you're going to be confrontational with yourself in a not an unhealthy way, but a challenging way. We rationalize our behavior a lot. We give ourselves a pass for a lot of things. Lent is a time to maybe sit down and say, well, let me be a little more honest. Let me try to think, how would Jesus see this? How would God see what I'm doing? And we kind of, at a gut level, already know the answer to that question. We have that gut intuition, like what I'm doing really isn't right. I really shouldn't be doing this. I'm glossing over a lot of things here in order to do this and pretending I'm not having the impact I know I'm actually having. But if we maybe are brave enough to sit down and slow down a minute and say, okay, well, what would Jesus be seeing right now? And would this be pleasing him? Would he be happy with me in this moment? Because when we challenge ourselves, Deb, without trying to step outside of ourselves and see with a different perspective, we often, the blinders that we've put on ourselves, and we're not even always aware of them, they're still in place and we're going to miss things. That's why it's so valuable if you have a truly good friend, Maybe you're lucky enough that you have a spiritual director. I know that's hard to find these days. But getting an outside perspective is so much more impactful than what we can do on our own, because we just don't see ourselves that clearly. And so when it comes to the spiritual struggles, telling the truth to somebody that you trust, that isn't going to abuse that, telling them the real truth about your spiritual life, about what sins you're struggling with, about how you feel about that struggle, and getting that outside perspective, you can maybe do it with imagination, as we said, imagine how Jesus might see this. But if you have that ability to recruit somebody into your battle, that is with you and for you, not that confrontational, you're doing bad, you need to do better, but you can go into the battle together, because ultimately, yes, Lent's about us repenting, but we're still the body of Christ, right? We still are supposed to encourage and help each other.
Yeah. I wish everybody would put this particular saying on the refrigerator, and I've always loved it. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always.
Yeah.
People are really struggling internally. They're hurting. And then, we have this penitential season of Lent, which adds more, if you will, stress on us, right, as Christians, because we want to do our very best. And so we're being really, pressured and strained in certain areas, because we're trying our hardest, but we're dealing with a lot. Many of us are dealing with health situations, and I know there's people with financial difficulties, and people in their relationships are struggling, their work situations, their housing, where they live. I mean, it's unbelievable how many things that folks are going through at the same time in their life. It's not just when I was younger, Adam. It used to be one or two things you'd hear every once in a great while. I never heard of cancer when I was younger. Now you hear people having 2 and 3 cancers. I mean, it really is tough to live in this world. So we really should give each other the benefit of the doubt, and maybe help each other along, and be very patient and kind and loving, and, really, hold our hand out and lift others up. What do you say?
Yeah, I agree. That was one of the lessons I kind of learned in the process of, being in training to be a therapist, is when you sit down with people as a therapist, and they really give you more of a window into their life than they pretty much give anybody else, except maybe if they go to their confessor, they might share a little more. But with a therapist, they're going to tell them a lot. And boy, Deb, you're right. Everybody's got a cross that they're carrying.
Many crosses sometimes.
Yeah. And they don't necessarily tell you about it, but just try to be patient and realize that human behavior and human emotions isn't just coming out of the blue. There's a reason people are maybe having a hard time that day. And they're not necessarily going to tell you those reasons, but you can be sure that there are reasons in their background that are leading to that. And it's an opportunity for us to practice that patience.
Very well said. And also to ask for the grace to deal with others if they are bothering you, or it's really getting your spirit to just be agitated. Okay, that ask for the grace, and ask those other people, encourage them, say, have you ever thought of asking for more grace? Because grace is available. That's the thing. We don't ask for grace enough.
Thank you for listening to The Next Right Thing with angel specialist Debbie Georgianni and religious demonologist Adam Bly. Debbie and Adam are daily contributors to the live radio program Morning Joy, hosted by Keith Downey every weekday on the Guadalupe Radio Network. For more authentic Catholic content, go to grnonline.com/joy.